I used to think silence meant peace. Honestly, I really did. If nobody was arguing, things must be okay. If nobody was upset, things are fine. Nobody was raising their voice. Things are okay, right? Turns out, not necessarily, right? Because eventually I learned something uncomfortable. Some of the quietest rooms I've ever been in were the least peaceful ones. And that's weird when you think about it. Because most of us are taught the opposite. We see conflict and think, problem. We see silence and think, oh, solution. Everything's good. But life has this funny way of exposing bad assumptions, Sometimes silence isn't peace. Sometimes silence is surrender. Sometimes silence is exhaustion. Sometimes it's somebody realizing they're not being heard. Think about that. How many conversations have ended not because understanding was reached, but because somebody gave up? How many people stopped talking? Not because everything got resolved, but because they don't believe it matters anymore. That's not peace, that's resignation. And those are two completely different things right there. What's fascinating about this to me is human beings will stay in uncomfortable situations for years. And if conflict feels dangerous enough, we'll smile, we'll nod, we'll say, everything's fine. It's peachy. Meanwhile, our nervous system is in the parking lot, just trying to start the car. We've all done it. Relationships, jobs, friend groups, churches, families. Something isn't right, you feel it, you notice it, but speaking up feels expensive. So you stay quiet. And at first, it feels easier for everybody. No confrontation, no disagreement, no awkward conversations, no uncomfortable truth, just peace. Except it isn't peace, it's deferred maintenance. Honestly, and eventually everything that gets ignored starts sending invoices. Every time. That's true for houses. That's true for cars. That's true for relationships. And it's definitely true for people. The funny thing is, we're often rewarded for silence. Especially when we're young. The quiet kid, the easy kid, the agreeable employee, the low maintenance spouse, or the team player. The one who doesn't make waves. Sounds great. Until you realize the waves are happening inside you. And then one day you wake up exhausted, right? Not because life is hard, but because carrying unspoken truth is really, really heavy. Really heavy. And eventually it just starts leaking out sideways. It has no choice. It comes out as frustration and resentment, burnout. Passive-aggressive comments that begin with, I'm not upset. We've done that. And it's always followed immediately by something, some kind of evidence that you are, in fact, upset. And honestly, that's one of the great human traditions. Pretending we're fine while actively demonstrating that we're not. We're incredible at this. Olympic level. Here's where things get interesting for me, though. Peace and silence, they're not enemies. Sometimes silence is peace. And then sometimes silence is just healing. Sometimes silence is wisdom. Sometimes it's exactly what we need. But the difference is choice. Chosen silence feels spacious. But, forced silence, that feels extremely heavy. Chosen silence, that creates rest for you, but when it's forced, it creates pressure. Chosen silence allows truth, but when it's forced, it just hides. That is a huge distinction. One is freedom and the other is fear wearing a disguise. And fear loves disguises. Fear it just calls, it calls itself maturity. Fear calls itself loyalty. It calls itself patience. It calls itself keeping the peace. But then meanwhile, peace is standing in the corner like, can you stop using my name for this? Because real peace doesn't require you to betray yourself. Think of that again. Real peace does not require you to betray yourself. Real peace does not require self-abandonment. That's one of the hardest lessons I ever learned. Because many of us, we're taught the opposite. Keep everybody comfortable. Keep everybody happy. Keep everybody calm. Even if it costs you yourself. After enough years of that going by, you stop knowing where everybody else ends and where you begin. That's not peace. That's disappearance. The older I get, the more respect I have for honest conversations. Not loud ones. Not angry ones. I don't like those. Honest ones. The kind where people, they risk discomfort for the sake of truth. The kind where nobody's trying to win. They're just trying to understand. Because, when you have understanding, it creates connection. Silence by itself, it doesn't do that. And maybe that's why some of the most healing conversations of my life started with words I didn't want to say. Some of the most damaging seasons of my life that were filled with things that I never said at all. And if somebody hears this, sitting quietly in a room somewhere that no longer feels peaceful, let me just say this. Not every silence is sacred. Not every quiet room is healthy. Not every lack of conflict is a sign of connection. So pay attention. Notice what your body feels in the silence. Notice whether you're resting or bracing, because there's a difference. And learning that difference, it can save you years. Because peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the absence of war within yourself. And those are not the same thing. And if this episode reminded you of anything, I hope it reminded you that silence isn't automatically healing. Sometimes silence is wisdom, and sometimes silence is just fear with good public relations. All right, so I'm going to say I'm fine and then spend the next 45 minutes proving that I'm absolutely not fine. I love you all and catch you guys next time.